We're here this afternoon to discuss the arrest of a confidential informant that had been used by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office for over a year. I'm going to name him. His name is Anthony Walker. He's a black male. His date of birth is 9/29/69. After you hear this, I'll leave it up to you all whether you want to publish his name or not, according to whatever policies and protocols you all use. But I've decided to name him, and his arrest and booking photo are available on our Who's in Jail site on the Sheriff's Office website. Walker has an extensive criminal history with over 30 arrests in Florida and Georgia, including attempted murder, theft, robbery, and various drug charges. As I said, since I took office, I'm going to be candid with you all and tell you about the good things, and there's a lot of good things that happen, and the bad things when the bad things happen. And that's the purpose of this today, because this is not a good situation. Although none of our people did anything wrong, our personnel followed all of the appropriate protocols, policies, and best practices for using confidential informants. But even when you do that, sometimes things go wrong. One of the things that is important to keep in mind is when we're talking about confidential informants and the use of confidential informants, we're talking about dealing with bad guys, with bad people. I, for a long time, worked drug cases. Over 10 years, I worked drug cases, and came to the conclusion that there's only 3 reasons why people cooperate with law enforcement and want to be confidential informants. And one is because they're working off charges themselves, and they want some consideration for the charges that they have pending against them. The second reason is they want to make money, and the third reason is they want to stick it to somebody. So revenge, making money, or working off charges are the only reasons why people cooperate with law enforcement. And when you have that situation, everything they do needs to be under the microscope. Everything they do has to be scrutinized, and everything they do has to be as closely supervised as it can possibly be. Although we don't live with them 24/7, and we can't control everything that they do. It's impossible to do that. There's a saying that goes this way, that you can't cast a play in hell with angels and starring roles. And that applies to the situation and the use of confidential informants, especially in drug cases. You can't walk up to somebody's front door and say, hey, I'm here from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, and I'd like to buy 2 ounces of cocaine from you. Guess what? It doesn't work. You can't go out on the street and walk up to somebody and say, hey, I think you got some crack in your pocket. Will you sell it to me? It doesn't work. The only way that people who are involved in drug dealing sell their drugs is to people they know, they trust, they've got some familiarity with. And so we can employ the best, the most productive, the most experienced undercover detectives, and they have limited resources, limited availability, limited success. You have to have somebody that knows the bad guy and has the trust and confidence of the bad guy, and that's where the confidential informants come in, because they're bad guys. They all run in the same circles and they know each other. So we need people that are going to give us that information so that then they can, in a controlled or supervised environment, make the buys, or they can introduce an undercover agent that they have vouched for. So that's how it works. And in this situation, Walker came to us in October of 2013. And his motivation for wanting to cooperate was the money motive. He wanted to make some money. And he provided information that he knew many people in the St. Petersburg area who were selling drugs. He wanted to work with law enforcement and, again, make money for making those introductions or those controlled purchases. As I said before, all of the protocols and policies were followed by our detectives and members of the Narcotics Division in establishing Walker as a confidential informant. Between October of 2013 and December of 2014, Walker identified at least 27 people who were selling various drugs, including powder cocaine, crack cocaine, oxycodone, and morphine in the St. Petersburg area. On December 5th of 2014, Walker told the detective that he was working with that a female subject would sell the undercover detective 35 morphine pills for about $1,000. The undercover detective met with the female in an undercover capacity after being introduced by Walker and purchased the drugs. As a standard practice, after the purchase was made, the detective returned to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, and when he got back to the office, he found that the morphine was actually not morphine, and it was a muscle relaxant that was a non-narcotic muscle relaxant. So in essence, the detective had been ripped off, and that happens. Again, people who are selling drugs aren't the most scrupulous people in the world, and sometimes we find that they sell counterfeit substances. So when he found out that he had been ripped off, he made the decision to go back out that night and to arrest this person for the sale of the counterfeit substances. So under Florida law, you can't sell drugs, but you can't also sell counterfeit drugs and what you purport to be something. So we run into this where you got people on the street corner that are selling crack cocaine, and when a detective goes out to make the buy, it actually turns out to be pieces of soap or something else that are cut up to look like crack, and there's a statute that prohibits the sale of these counterfeit substances. So he went out to make this arrest, and when he did, he identified himself as a law enforcement officer, and he conducted an interview with this person. And the person said, well, that's all fine and well, and you're saying that what I sold you wasn't the morphine, but guess what? Is that I don't know anything about that because Walker is the one that gave me the drugs to sell to you. So if there's a silver lining in this, it's that this detective and his supervisors did the right thing, is they acted appropriately. It could have gone in a different direction, and in some cases it might have been very easy for the detective to discount what this person was saying and to blow it off and not give it any credibility at all. But to this detective's credit and to the supervisor's credit is they did the right thing, they listened, and they conducted further investigation. And as a result of that further investigation, they were able to determine that Walker had, in fact, on several occasions, made people into drug dealers who weren't so that he could make a profit. And he set up these really fake drug deals. In one case, in addition to the one I just told you about, on July 16th of 2014, detectives bought what was purported to be 53 grams of cocaine. It's a trafficking amount of cocaine. Carries a minimum mandatory sentence in state prison from a suspect for $2,600. So about an ounce and a half of cocaine for about $2,600. On July 25th of 2014, about 9 days later, detectives again purchased another 49 grams of what was purported to be cocaine from the same person, this time for $2,000. It turned out that cocaine really wasn't cocaine, but was a fake substance. And as it turns out, Walker provided that fake substance to the suspect to sell to the undercover detective. Of the $4,600 in Pinellas County Sheriff's Office funds that were paid to the, quote, suspect for the cocaine, Walker pocketed $3,900 of that and gave the made-up drug dealer $700. In another case, on October 22nd of 2014, Walker introduced an undercover detective to a person, and that person agreed to sell 35 morphine pills. It turned out the person received the morphine from Walker to sell to the undercover detective. The same thing happened again on November 6th of 2014 and again on November 19th of 2014 with morphine and Dilaudid. So Walker gets the morphine and Dilaudid. He goes to somebody and says, hey, I know somebody who wants to buy this morphine and Dilaudid, who's the undercover detective that he's working with as a confidential informant, gives this person the drugs and makes up some story as to why he wants this other person to actually sell the drugs and do the hand-to-hand transaction as opposed to doing it himself. Calls the undercover detective and says, hey, I got somebody that wants to sell drugs and come with me, and they hook up. And so Walker's hooking up the undercover with this unknown person, this unwitting person, and is selling the drugs that Walker provided to him. And then after the person collects the money from the undercover, he gives him a couple bucks for doing the deal and pockets what the undercover paid. On Wednesday night, Walker was arrested on 3 counts of drug trafficking for supplying the drugs that were sold to the undercover agent in the morphine and Dilaudid transactions. He's currently being held in the Pinellas County Jail and his bond is $90,000. Walker actually had valid prescriptions for morphine and Dilaudid, as well as the muscle relaxant, which was the fake substance in the first transaction I mentioned to you. He admitted after his arrest that he had set up these fake drug deals by providing the drugs to the suspects that they sold to the undercover detectives. In all, there were 16 cases where detectives used Walker to buy drugs, including cocaine, crack cocaine, morphine, and other pharmaceuticals, where we have pending charges against individuals. Fortunately, in those 16 cases, none of those people have ever been arrested. The charges were pending, and of course, they won't be arrested, and those cases and investigations will be closed. We don't know if in those 16 cases what happened in the 3 that I described to you happened in these 16, but similar circumstances, similar situations. Walker denies that it happened in those 16 cases, but we see what his credibility is, which is 0, so those cases, of course, will be closed. There are 9 cases where arrests were made and prosecution is pending. I talked to State Attorney Bernie McCabe today, made him aware of the situation. We're going to provide the State Attorney's Office with the list of those cases, and I'm confident that the right thing will be done by the State Attorney and that those cases will be dismissed. There's an additional case, and those of you that may have covered it, if you remember a couple months ago now, we announced the arrest of Robert Weiss on human trafficking charges, actually RICO charges that the statewide prosecutor's office filed. And as part of that case, there was also a drug buy that was made from Robert Weiss, and it was for 56 grams of cocaine, and Walker was the informant who made that drug buy against Robert Weiss. The statewide prosecutor's office likewise has been made aware of this situation involving Walker. There is nothing that should affect the human trafficking charges, but the trafficking and cocaine aspect of it, of course, is problematic because of Walker's involvement. There's also one case involving a defendant by the name of Darrel Watkins, where Walker purchased or arranged for an undercover law enforcement officer to purchase trafficking amounts of crack cocaine. The Watkins case was a joint investigation between the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office and the FBI, and prosecution of Watkins is pending in federal court. Watkins has entered into a plea agreement with the United States Attorney's Office, but he has not been sentenced by the federal judge. I spoke today with Lee Bentley, the United States Attorney, made him aware of the situation, and they are reviewing the matter and will take the action that they deem appropriate. During the time that Walker was an informant for the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, he was paid a total of $7,260, in addition to what he profited from setting up the bogus drug deals, like the $3,900 he stole during the cocaine deal that I mentioned previously. So, again, these things happen. When you're dealing with informants, you're dealing with bad people, and they do bad things. We were able to detect this ourselves. We listened to what we were being told by the person who claimed that Walker had done this. It wasn't discounted. We investigated it thoroughly and have taken the appropriate action by charging Walker and notifying the proper prosecuting authorities regarding the other cases, and I'm sure that they will take the necessary action to see that those cases are dismissed.